Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR. I've got a lot to talk about going on in the Big Ten. You might say off season. I say big, full show to talk about because we got a lot going on, a lot to talk about with you. We have Big Jeff, here with us to share his truths that he learned in the Big Ten this year that we think are also truths going forward. We're going to give those, or Jeff's going to give those to you. I'm going to respond, kind of give my feedback on what he's got to say. It's going to be a good time. But we've also got news and notes before that. We've got defensive coordinator change with Rutgers. We have USC hiring the general manager away from Wisconsin. Washington's new offensive coordinator. National Signing Day is tomorrow. If you didn't know that, there's a couple things to talk about there. And then we are going to talk about some of these way too early top 25s and discuss just how many Big Ten teams are in them, how many SEC teams are in them. Is it warranted? Is it not warranted? We're going to talk about it all. But I got Jeff with me here tonight. If you watched the returning players video, you'll recognize Jeff. If not, totally fine. I'm going to give Jeff the opportunity to introduce himself, let you know a little bit more about him and where you can find his work.
Hey everyone, so Jeff McMichael. Yeah, I've been on the pod one time with JR. I'm actually an Indiana grad, living 20 years now in the ground zero for SEC football. So I live in Atlanta, Georgia. Also a side Ohio State fan, so I got to attend the national title game. Wasn't cheap, but it was just a great atmosphere and really capped a terrific Big Ten season. I run a website called bigjeffsfootball.com. So the truths I'm going to be talking about at the end of this podcast, I have a more full-blown article on my website. It's 8 truths. I'm going to cover 5 of them tonight. And then on X, you can see I'm at Big Jeff's FT Ball on X as well. So thanks, JR, for having me join.
For sure, yeah. And if you want to read those, they are in the description. There is a link in the description right under the part that talks about the show. There's a link right there. You can find it. Don't go to it yet. Don't spoil it. Right. Stay with us for the 5 that we talk about here, and then you can go read the 3 extra that Jeff has as well. So we're super excited to be here. Let's see who else is joining us. Got Billy Tuesday. Hello, seniors. Hello, Billy Tuesday. Thank you for being here. Doug says his mic is louder than yours, JR. All right, I will turn mine up a little bit. Thank you for that, Doug. Hopefully that is a little bit better. Let me know, guys, if it is too quiet or too loud. I always appreciate the feedback on that. We got Pitt Snipe Husker. Good evening, gentlemen. Billy, too. There you go, Billy. You get a shout out. And Philip, ILL, INI. There you go, Philip. I'll finish it there for you if there's no other Illinois fans in here just yet. So, all right. Thanks for being here, everybody. We're going to have a great show. We're going to have a lot of fun with Jeff and talking about his truths and everything else. Before we get too deep into that, like I said, we're going to get into some news and notes, things like that going on. Doug Shepard says slightly better. All right, I might just need to move my mouth closer, and I will do that. So I will do my best to give you guys the best audio experience possible, and I always appreciate you guys' feedback. Thank you. All right, Jeff, our very first topic of tonight is that USC has hired away. Whoops, I got the wrong one. Oh, I forgot to make a graphic for that one. All right, we'll just run with it without the graphic. USC has hired away Wisconsin's general manager. If you recall, they did hire away Notre Dame's general manager. This one is Max Steinecker, I believe is how you pronounce it, Steinecker. And then Chad Bowden was the one from Notre Dame that they hired away. So USC really concentrating on their support staff and everything that they have. So that's really cool for USC. And I think this is a pretty big deal for USC fans. I think I've shared my thoughts in some other videos. You know, USC has done a good job of getting recruits committed, but I think that they've had a hard time, obviously, of keeping them committed, and that's a big thing. So Lincoln Riley, he's getting the support staff he needs. Hopefully he can hold on to some more recruits, and I have the feeling that after a couple seasons of disappointing years, Lincoln Riley is probably thinking to himself, I got to change a few things around here. It's not just Alex Grinch. There's other stuff going on. Got to change a few things around here. Right, Jeff?
So when I saw this topic, I went on a little podcast to a Wisconsin site today, and they thought this is a big deal for Wisconsin, a big loss. They recognized in today's environment, You're going to have a lot of coaching turnovers. They mentioned all things going on with Ohio State, but this guy has he's a Cincinnati grad, so he had ties to Fickell from the Cincinnati days, and he was really Wisconsin, despite poor performance on the field. Their recruiting's been picking up big time under Fickell. You're just not seeing it on the field. So, JR, I think this is a big deal. They do think Fickell's good enough to replace him well, but you never know. You can always have a miss, right? So don't want to underestimate what this means for USC.
Yeah, for sure. USC is going to benefit from this, but there is the aspect of Wisconsin as well. And I have to wonder if maybe the Wisconsin general manager was possibly leaving because he's seen some of the writing on the door of if things don't get better, then you could be in a situation where Luke Fickell is gone, and does he have somewhere else to go? I believe in Luke Fickell. I think that Luke Fickell can get it right next season. I just think that Wisconsin's going to have to be a little bit patient with Luke Fickell because they do have a really tough schedule next year with everything looking at it and how it's going to possibly turn out next year. So we'll see. I know there are Wisconsin fans that I know that are upset with Luke Fickell and everything going on there, but I mean, Jeff, you tell me, do you get the feeling, do you get the sense that this is kind of Luke Fickell's last year to really prove himself? Or are you kind of, thinking like, they understand it's a tough schedule, they might give him some more time? Where do you stand on that?
So it's interesting. I have some, when I go into my truths, Fickell's part of that discussion. They've been amazingly patient. I mean, the one podcast I listen to consistently, they kind of give him a pass to say, when he came on board, they thought, oh, he's going to do the Wisconsin way, but just better. But Fickell took a chance and said, I'm going to try something completely different and go air raid, hire Phil Longo. It just didn't work out. And so now they're going to give him that second chance. But with this new offensive coordinator hire, I can tell you, it must work. If that you don't get a third chance, right? So that's what I think, JR. I think the other recognition from Wisconsin, though, is if you look at their schedule, it's rough. So it's not just going to be the record of Wisconsin this year, it's how they look. They can't have like a blowout to Iowa. Wisconsin fans were really upset with that. In Iowa, with that Iowa offense, they should not be blowing out anybody, right? And so that OC is going to be the important thing. It's imperative that they get that offense back going. If they go 7-5 and are really competitive in their losses, I think he's okay. If they go 7-5 and there's some ugly losses and the offense doesn't look that good, we're talking a different story potentially.
Yeah, you hit the nail right on the head because Philip asked here. He says, "How good of a season numbers wise, like numbers of win, does Wisconsin need?" I mean, I think they need at least 6 wins, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Like they need to get back to a bowl at the very least. But I think with 6 wins, you can manage that if, like you said, you're close with Iowa. Maybe you beat Minnesota, or vice versa, close with Minnesota, but you beat Iowa. You need to be competitive with Michigan, Maryland,
you got Ohio
Alabama.
State coming in. Do you look pretty good against Ohio State, right? Do you look like you can hang with? You don't have to beat Ohio State, but if you get your doors blown off, that's a problem, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Or at least hang in the game for at least a half, right? Like that Alabama game last year. Granted, Tyler Van Dyke went out, but still, that game was over after the first quarter. I mean,
Wisconsin's supposed to have a good defense, right? Their quarterback goes down. Their defense should be able to hang in, and they didn't.
Right.
So,
and it's a lot of seeing what Alabama turned into at the end of the year, right? They scored 3 points against Oklahoma. It's like, okay, Wisconsin, you couldn't figure out how to play some defense against that when they do that against Oklahoma. Now, we also saw what they did to Georgia, so we understand that a little bit more. But I think just looking at it, you have to see your team be more competitive. You have to see your team be more competent, and like I said, probably 6 wins is the floor there. You might be able to get away with 5, but I'm thinking this fan base is going to want to see at least a bowl game. We'll see. It's a really tough schedule. Reminding people they have at Alabama, at Michigan, Ohio State, at Oregon, at Indiana, and that doesn't even mention Illinois at home. That doesn't even mention Iowa,
Minnesota.
Like there are so many tough. Like you're probably your easiest game on Wisconsin's schedule, other than Miami of Ohio and Middle Tennessee. They don't even have an FCS game. Other than those two, probably your easiest game on this schedule is Washington at home. And like Washington, I don't think they're going to be a bad team next year. Will they be a playoff team? I don't think so. They have the possibility of getting there, but as far as I'm concerned, this is a really tough schedule for Wisconsin next year. And
And not to go too long on Wisconsin, but on that podcast, they said, yeah, Alabama falls off after next year, goes on the schedule, Notre Dame. And we know how they got a home and home with Notre Dame. And so Notre Dame's, looking like a top 10 team for the next, as long as Freeman is there, right? So, yeah.
I apologize. I just recognized this. This was an insult to Washington. Their easiest game is Maryland. Maryland is right after at Alabama. So sorry, Washington fans. I was not trying to insult you there. Last question, and then we'll move on. Billy Tuesday asks, how exciting how excited are Whiskey fans about their new QBs? I think they're excited for the future of Danny O'Neil, at least from what I've heard. Billy Edwards has given them a little bit of pause. Like they are believing, Billy Edwards didn't have the best offensive line at Maryland, and Mike Locksley has done a pretty good job with quarterbacks. So maybe he comes in and he's good, but I think they would have been much happier if like Tyler Van Dyke came back last year or something like that. I think more than anything, they just don't want their backup quarterback playing.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I mean, what they want to see is a consistent running game, kind of like the old days, but not just run based, supplemented with at least good quarterback play. I mean, they're not expecting, a Will Howard type transfer to come in or Russell Wilson or anything, although they would love that. So, and just that defense too, they want to see their defense return to more what they expect from a tough Badger defense. But I think that defense has been hurt by the offenses. As soon as I heard that long ago, and I thought, you know what? Wisconsin defense, as good as they are, they're not that deep. That defense is going to fall off. And it's not necessarily because they're any worse. It's just that they're on the field longer, right? There's not the ball control offense. And so it's that complementary football that Wisconsin fans want to see again, I think. And I would expect that. Whether they can really execute that with the schedule is going to be the big question.
Yeah, I agree. Good thoughts there. All right, we got to move on. Let's move on to the Rutgers defensive coordinator hire. Rutgers we talked about this last episode, that some Rutgers fans thought the coordinator was set. However, they did not hire Chris Hewitt Sr. Instead, they hire Rod Smith and Zach Sparber. These two guys, Rod Smith comes from Penn State. Believe he was an analyst the last couple years or last year, and he did coach at Rutgers before that. He went someplace else, then went to Penn State, and then went back to Rutgers now. And then trying to remember where Zach Sharber was from. I'll find it here in a second. But Jeff, for Greg Schiano, it's been kind of a tough road this last year. Obviously, their defense was not as good as it was the past 2 years. The past 2 years, their defense was at the very least middle of the pack in the Big Ten. I believe it was the 2022 defense that was actually kind of near the top 5 a little bit with some of the metrics that were going on there. So that was a good year for Rutgers, but they fell off this year, giving up, 40-some points to Kansas State in the bowl game. And of course, that's a bowl game. They have some younger guys playing and stuff like that there, but also just not playing good Rutgers defense for most of the season. Do you think that these hirings for Rutgers can get them back into playing good Rutgers defense? What's your thoughts here, Jeff?
So to me, the story of the defense this past year was the injuries that they had. It was even before the season started, they had some injuries. And when you lose an injury like that, it's not just a player. Sometimes it's a senior who's a team leader, right? So it's not just the position, it's their leadership and their influence on the rest of the defense. So this gets back to that Wisconsin discussion. I mean, Rutgers under Schiano, they want to be a version of what Wisconsin was when Wisconsin is good, right? A really good run game, a solid quarterback with some decent receivers to throw to, but let's control the clock. Let's keep our defense off the field so that they can play with their hair on fire. And, it doesn't work, though, because at a school like Rutgers, if you have some injuries, they don't have the depth of a Ohio State or Penn State or the Blue Bloods. That's the big difference between the Blue Bloods and your Wisconsin and the mid-tier, like your Iowas, just don't have the depth. So, I would say it's more important just the having the making sure the injury situation and they're able to stay healthy, play complementary football, keep that defense off the field. And Cristiano is not going to be running tempo or anything, right? Complementary football. And so, yes, I would expect improvement on that. But the reality is on Rutgers, and I kind of get into it too, is, they had a really easy schedule last year. So it was really disappointing. They had a chance to really win 9 games, maybe even 10 if everything went right. But those injuries just completely, prevented those potential expectations. A lot of people have had them as their sleeper team based on that schedule. And that's going to be a common theme, is what does your schedule look like to drive results? So, need to get healthy, JR, and results will follow.
Yeah, I agree. Doug Shepard says Rutgers had a ton of injuries in 24. Yeah, Zach and I talked about it right at the beginning of the year. I think it was Toure that got injured at the beginning of the year. It was even before games started, I believe. I believe it was Toure. But yeah, there were injuries throughout the entire season for Rutgers. It was something that was really hard for them to try and overcome. And when you're at Rutgers, you don't have the most depth in the world. You develop your guys and you do a good job with that, but most of your depth is younger players who just normally aren't ready yet. They can be ready in a year or two, but they're just not ready yet, nor most of the time. And so, and Rutgers also is not out there, spending tons and tons of NIL money to bring in, super good backups. And also, their brand doesn't really allow them to, bring in guys and say, hey, you can be a backup here, and still have a prestigious job. It's just unfortunately the way it is for them. So HJG says, no knock on Sparber. He might turn out to be an amazing hire down the road, but this is very underwhelming to Rutgers fans. Most have no great love for Rod Smith. Yeah, I listened to a podcast and they didn't seem too excited about Rod Smith, and it is a little underwhelming. Sparber, I did check myself. He was the linebackers coach at JMU. I do think, possibly bringing in somebody from JMU, James Madison University, that's been a breeding ground for good coaches, but somebody that's only the linebackers coach there, and he wasn't there for very long. I think he was only there for 1, maybe 2 seasons. Yeah, he was only there for 1 season, 2024. So, for me, it's one of those things where it might not be the most, splashy hire in the world, but you know what? Their old defensive coordinator was Don Brown, and Don Brown wasn't exactly the most splashy hire in the world with some of the ways things went for him in his career before he got to Rutgers, and things weren't bad with Don Brown. And then he got the job over at UMass, I believe it was UMass, and went from there. So as far as I'm concerned, I trust Greg Schiano and his hiring. Hopefully these are kind of some star in the making type of guys. Hopefully Rod Smith, brings in some good experience. We'll see. But I can't blame you, HJG, for not being super excited. It definitely would have been more of a home run to get, Chris Hewitt Sr. or somebody else like that. So, all right, let's hit the next topic here. Washington elevates Jimmy Daugherty to offensive coordinator. So if you're not paying attention to what's going on over at Washington last year, I mean, this kind of went under the radar a little bit. Their offensive coordinator and their defensive coordinator were the sons of Pete Carroll and Bill Belichick, which was rather interesting. That didn't really get talked about a whole lot last year. I didn't think we talked about it a whole lot. There was just so much stuff going on in the season, but obviously, Steve Belichick going over, being with his dad, Bill Belichick, over at North Carolina. And Pete Carroll's son is going to the Raiders to join him over there. The old quarterback coach, Jimmy Daugherty, he is elevated to the offensive coordinator. But one thing we didn't talk about, and Zach didn't even get a chance to really share his thoughts on it, but in addition to hiring Daugherty, at really the end of the season, after Ryan Walters was fired from Purdue, they hire Ryan Walters to be the defensive coordinator there at Washington. And it was kind of another move that kind of went under the radar because when Ohio State lost Jim Knowles, there were Ohio State fans saying, well, what about that Ryan Walters guy? He was so good at Illinois. And it's like, nope, it's already been scooped up. He's over at Washington. But at the end of the day, like, I don't know if I can question too much of Jed Fish's hirings because he is a super well-connected guy. He's been so many different places. If he feels like he has somebody that can do a good job for him, now he may have been forced into this with how late his offensive coordinator did leave. But as far as I'm concerned, Jedd Fisch seems to know what he's doing. Daugherty, I believe, was with him at Arizona with Delora and what's the other guy's name that was there last year, the quarterback for Arizona. I can't remember his name, but he had a good year as well. So I mean, what are your thoughts here, Jeff? You like the addition of Daugherty, and then maybe Ryan Walters touch on that as well.
So I'm not familiar with Doherty, but the coaching ranks is full of coaches I had never heard of, and all of a sudden they're good. So I'm an Indiana grad. I had never heard of Kurt Signetti when he got hired, but then I did Google him and saw his performance and everything. I'm like, he's pretty good. When Ohio State hired Jim Tressel, it's like, who the hell? Where is this guy from? Jim Tressel, like, turns out to be a great coach. So you just don't know. I do like how he was on staff, right? And they have that young quarterback who was a freshman. I'm betting that he has good synergy with that guy. So there's things like that we don't know about, right? And maybe him and that new quarterback, I can't think of his name, but he's going to be the starter next year. Super talented, right? I think the Ryan Walters hire is awesome, though. I mean, proven coach. I mean, Brett Bielema just hires really good people, runs a great program. He did wonders at Illinois. The fact that he failed as a coach at Purdue, often when you fail, that's when you learn the most. That doesn't bother me at all. I mean, he's going to be able to leverage that experience in positive ways. So I think that's, and especially for as late in the cycle as that was, JR, I don't know when that was announced. That's a great hire to me, right? That to me is there's no such thing as a slam dunk, as I'll get to my truths later. But he's got actual performance, right? And it's not just like promise. It's actual performance that you got in Ryan Walters. So good hire.
Yeah. I mean, you get somebody from the Brett Bielema tree. Brett Bielema is really good at developing his coaches and making them better as well. I do think that Ryan Walters got a little bit of the credit for what Aaron Henry probably should have got with some of those quarterbacks and defensive backs that came out of Illinois. But I still don't take credit away from Ryan Walters. I think Ryan Walters, obviously, he was the defensive coordinator there when he took the job at Purdue, and they had their really good season. So as far as I'm concerned, I think Ryan Walters a good coach, and I mean, really, his biggest issue was he had a whole bunch of injuries his first year, and then his second year, his staff that he tried to put together wasn't very good. I mean, you're going to have a whole lot of guys who try to put together a staff their very first time having a head coaching job, and it doesn't go well. It's just the way it is. Like, these guys need more experience to try and do that and to do it well. And that's where a guy like Jedd Fisch, who has been around so many times, I believe this is only his second head coaching job, but because he's been around, because he's been so many different places, he has the ability to know so many different guys and hire them and also know what to look for. He's seen enough guys. Bill Belichick, he was with him for a little while. He's seen other head coaches hire guys to know, hey, this is what they're looking for. This is what these type of guys, try to find in their coordinators and assistant coaches. And Jedd Fisch is obviously using that here.
Yeah, the other thing is, when you think about Washington, it's only they're going to be their second year in the Big Ten. Walters was game planning for Illinois against all these Big Ten teams. He was doing this. Well, he ended up calling offensive plays, interestingly, for Purdue. That was pretty wild. But my point is, he's quite familiar with the teams, how to attack them. And so that's a real win for Washington, right? Because they have a lot of assistants that really don't know the Big Ten. I mean, just 1 year experience is not enough. So he really adds that element as well, JR. I think,
Totally agree. Totally agree. Billy Tuesday said hardest thing for a new head coach is hiring the right staff. I totally agree. I mean, you can normally get away with it with your first one because you do have a lot more help and maybe some more time. But still, hiring your first staff, it's a really, really tough to do. Philip, our Illinois fan, he says Walters wasn't ready to be a head coach when he took the Purdue job, and it wasn't a great fit for Purdue. Yeah, we addressed that when we talked about, kind of his tenure there. We were like, you had Jeff Brom, who had that kind of high flying, fast, pass the ball offense. They did run the ball as well, obviously, but they really focused more on the passing game. And Jeff Brom did a lot of good things with quarterbacks. And then you go from that to a defensive minded head coach in Ryan Walters, and it's his first year as a head coach too. So that was kind of a weird fit to me. I'm sure we'll see Ryan Walters if things go well at Washington and maybe somewhere else. I'm sure we'll see Ryan Walters get another shot at head coaching again. And I'm inclined to believe, like you said, Jeff, he's going to take those lessons he learned and submit them to wherever he is
Yeah.
next.
And I'm going to steal a little from my stuff that comes later, but let's contrast Indiana and Purdue. So the Indiana formula under Cignetti is, production over potential. And part of that too is bringing his entire, basically, James Madison staff with him to Indiana. The only exception was the offensive line coach. Bostad, I think he was kept. He has Wisconsin background, so the guy's really good at what he did. So that means when Cignetti showed up at Indiana, he had a whole staff that knew what he wanted to do. He didn't have to sync with his coaching staff. They could hit the ground running with their players, and then they got the players to transfer from James Madison in the teens. I can't remember the exact figure, 14, 15 of them. And so that was just a lethal combo. Contrast that with Purdue. When you hire a new guy who's never been a head coach, they have to hire a whole new staff. And it's more than just hiring them. Then you have to align and make sure everyone's culturally aligned. Here's what we're trying to do. That takes a while. It just, hiring the hot coordinator has major issues. And it's why hiring the mid-level coach where he can bring his staff, hit the ground running, is a better formula. The good news for Purdue is they're doing that with Barry Odom. They're trying to do Curt Cignetti 2.0, right, with Barry Odom and UNLV. So I'm stealing from my stuff later, JR, but what the hell? We're getting the questions. So
we're just teasing the audience, They're just
yes.
getting a little taste right now.
Yeah.
We'll give you the full
Yeah.
flavor here at the end. So I could not agree more, Joe R. He
Ton of
he brought a
JMU.
whole bunch of JMU players. Yeah. And it was a good idea,
And Purdue's
obviously.
trying to
So
do that again with I don't know what the
UNLV
numbers
players.
are, but I know a good number of UNLV. And UNLV, remember, had a great year last year. You're not just bringing guys who are on a mediocre team. JMU was excellent the prior year, and UNLV had an excellent year last year too. So it really does give Purdue hope. As an Indiana fan, I hope it doesn't happen, but what can I say?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, and they were a win away. They were in the Mountain West Championship game, and I think if they won that game, they would have possibly been in the playoffs. No, I think Army was still ahead of them.
But they were close.
So
Yeah, it
yeah,
was
they
right
were
there.
close, but they were close. So you're getting some love in the chat there, Jeff. Great point, Jeff. And yes, Jeff, a lot of rules, original staff. He moved on in a timely manner. So I ain't hating. There we go. Appreciate that. Oh, and real quick, Pit Snipe reminded us. Where's it at? Nebraska did hire a new special teams coordinator. I don't know if that's big enough for me to. Yeah, there we go. Eckler. They did hire a new special teams coordinator. With how bad special teams was for him last year, who knows? Maybe that's the secret hire they need. So there you go. Well,
we won't know how well the special teams played in the spring game, I guess, though. Huh?
Yeah, we won't know
improvement.
That. Yeah.
Won't see it.
We won't know that. So unfortunately, but that does mean nobody's gonna be able to tamper with his kicker. So there you go. We got Terry here. Terry saying, "Hey JR, hey Terry, good to see you, man. Thanks for being here." All right, Terry, you arrived just in time because we have one more segment, and then we're going to get into some way too early top 25s, and Indiana will be in that discussion. All right. I don't imagine this will take very long, but since it is tomorrow, I feel like we need to mention it, Jeff. National Signing Day is tomorrow. There's really only two recruits out there that are in contention for Big Ten schools. That's Ty Haywood, the former Alabama commit. Depending on where you look, he is a 5-star in some places, but not others. It looks like he is most likely heading to Michigan. And then Zahir Mathis right now is going to be picking between Maryland and Florida State. USC did get a defensive lineman, kind of slash edge, out of the 2025 committed to them, so he should sign with them tomorrow. I'll have to look up his name to remind me. But Jeff, any thoughts here? Zahir Mathis, Ty Haywood? You think these guys are going to Big Ten schools? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know if they're going. I mean, Michigan's very compelling for offensive linemen. Even though their offensive line wasn't great this year, they did show they definitely can develop. So that wouldn't surprise me. Zahir Mathis, I believe he's from the DMV, right? From that area.
He's from Pennsylvania, but very close to that DMV area.
Yeah, and former Ohio State commit. I was going to say, do you really want to go where Mike Locksley is? To me, he's one of the 3 coaches probably on the hot seat. But with the transfer portal, maybe it's just not that big of a thing, right? You're not going to be stuck at a place. If a coach leaves, you can leave. So, yeah, I don't know. I would imagine something like this for him, though. If he left Ohio State, it's maybe he's looking for playing time, right? Because I don't know Ohio
Yeah.
State. There's no guarantee of anything when it comes to that. So, one thing that we know, Mike Locksley, though, can get 4-star recruits. There's no, and he is I think he might be a high 4-star recruit even. So yeah, no, number 86 player. That's probably a high 4-star. So
Yeah.
wouldn't be
Top 100.
surprised Maryland got him.
Yeah, no, I think Maryland can be a pretty good breeding ground for Penn State too, and I think that's probably where Zahir Mathis wanted to end up. He just didn't get the chance to go there, so maybe he goes to Maryland, has a good year there, and maybe it's a Chop Robinson situation where he goes over from Maryland to Penn State. We'll see. But yeah, that's what Penn State guy says. Penn State passed on him, and OSU processed him out. Yeah, it was. I don't want to get into the entire story with Zahir Mathis, but from what kind of was said behind the scenes, Penn State guys right here just kind of moved on from him, and so hopefully he'll find his footing and go somewhere and be a good player. So yeah, all right. Oh, Penn State guy says he's from Philly. Okay, he's from Philly. It's still close to the DMV, close enough. I thought he was closer than that. My apologies. All right, let's see. Jeff, let's hit a break really quick, and then we'll come back and we will talk about where Big Ten teams have ranked in the way too early top 25s that we've seen so far this year. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Homefield is your go-to destination for premium collegiate apparel with a passion for comfort and a flair for vintage design. Homefield brings you gear that is comfortable and stylish. With over 150 colleges to choose from, Homefield digs deep into the archives, uncovering forgotten logos, iconic mascots, and legendary moments to create one-of-a-kind apparel. Use my code TBTH for 15% off for new customers, or use my link in the description.
Back here on the Big Ten Huddle, we appreciate you being with us. Please do like and subscribe. Helps out the channel, helps out our distribution, and everything else. So if you would, we would appreciate it if you would take the time, just click like the video, subscribe as well, and keep coming back and watch it. We always appreciate you all coming back and listening once again. All right, so here's what I've done. I have gone through and I have found the kind of like the main way too early top 25 from most of the big college football sites out there. So I took Brad Crawford's from 24/7, Andy and Ari's from On3, Athlon's, Joel Klatt's top 10, Bleacher Report, CBS, Dennis Dodd, ESPN, Mark Schlabach, Sports Illustrated, NCAA.com, and Yahoo. So I have 10 total here of the way too early top 25, other than Joel Klatt. He just did his top 10. And I went ahead and took an average of where all the Big Ten teams were placed. There were only, let's see, what was it? 8 Big Ten teams mentioned overall. Nebraska mentioned twice. Iowa was only mentioned once in the Yahoo way too early top 25. Nebraska was mentioned in Brad Crawford's and Andy and Ari's of On3, and I think that was it. Yeah, they were only mentioned twice. Everybody else, that is their average rank in all of them. So I just want to have a discussion with Jeff about these Big Ten teams. Do we think they got it right? What are we thinking with where Big Ten teams should be ranked? And then we'll have a discussion about the Big Ten and SEC, as I also took the average of how many Big Ten teams were included and how many SEC teams were included. As you can see down there, 6.2 in the Big Ten were included and 9.8 in the SEC were included. But Jeff, we'll start with the Big Ten teams. Wherever you want to start, whatever team first, give your thoughts on maybe their average ranking and if you would maybe go higher or lower, stuff like that.
Yeah, the one a little bit of a surprise with all that Penn State had coming back, and I'm even forgetting Knowles because I know some of these came out before the Knowles news hit that Penn State hired Jim Knowles, the defensive coordinator from Ohio State, as many of you hopefully know. But Ohio State loses a ton of people. I did feel, because the nature of what happened last year is all those seniors coming back, what that meant is a bunch of guys that normally would be playing and were ready waited another year. So those guys are really ready to hit the ground running. So I get the Ohio State being higher, but to me, Penn State being lower speaks to, do you believe in Drew Aller or not? So if you believe in Drew Aller, you're going to do what Joel Klatt did because he believes in Drew Aller and put Penn State before Ohio State. If you don't believe he's going to come through in big games, you keep Ohio State ahead. And I agree with it because of the pent-up roster that they have of 4 stars chomping at the bit, wanting Jack Sawyer to, have left last year, right? All right, JR. So that's my thought on the top end. The other thing that's really noticeable to me is, key to any conference, you need your blue bloods to be blue bloods. USC not on here hurts the Big Ten. It's not good. I mean, Lincoln Riley needs to get his act together. The Big Ten needs him to be USC. And then Wisconsin and even Michigan State at times has been really good in that, 10 to 20 range. They're nowhere to be found. So, the difference between the big discussion between the SEC and the Big Ten, in my view, is all about the mid-tier teams. How many of them are there for the Big Ten? How many for the SEC? And to me, clearly, and this might be the SEC bias, I don't know, but there's a lot more teams there because there's the perception that mid-tier for the SEC, there's more teams there. Let's put them in the top 25, and there's less in the Big Ten from the mid-tier. That's why the numbers are higher for the SEC.
Yeah, I went ahead and messed with my mic settings one more time. Let me know if that is any better for you guys or not. If not, I'll go back to the other setting. Not sure why I'm having issues with being even with Jeff tonight, but just let me know in the chat, guys. I totally agree with you. The mid-tier of the SEC is definitely where they're giving more credit to them. I mean, looking through these top 25s, a lot of, the SEC teams that were higher up there that kind of gave them, okay, now I'm very quiet. All right, I'll just go back to the last one.
I hear you good, JR. I hear you good, though. At least I do.
You can hear me good?
Yep,
All right.
yep.
All right, well, let's see if some other people have some thoughts. I don't know what's going on. I have the wrong one selected. Do you have the wrong one selected? Oh, okay.
All right. How's that?
Ooh, yeah, much louder.
Much louder?
Yeah.
Okay. How's that? Is that any better?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, guys. I don't know why I did that. I think when I went to the settings, when I undid that setting, it went to the other one. All right. My bad, guys. Hopefully this is better. All right. Way better, Philip says. I don't know why I did that. All right. Let's get back to it. So yes, I agree with you. The mid-tier of the SEC is really where things kind of get better for them. But I think that's all perception because you look at it. Florida was not a good team last year, but for whatever reason, people are looking at Florida and saying like, oh, I mean, I saw them in like the top 15 above Illinois in some places. And I'm thinking to myself, like, if you were honestly thinking that Florida is going to be a better team than Illinois next year, like I don't think you're paying attention to Illinois at all. You're looking at this portal class of Florida and then you're looking at DJ Lagway and saying like, oh, well, he's going to be great. In reality, like Billy Napier finished the year well last year, but who's to say he doesn't do what he's done the past 2 years he was there? You know what I'm saying? Like, so I think that the SEC continues to get this little bit of extra, I don't know if it's bias or if it's just like fluff and saying like, oh, well, they got the talent from down south or whatever it is. But as we've seen before, just because you have more talent doesn't always equate a better team. And I think that's the biggest thing that does not get considered with Big Ten teams is that the Big Ten has better coaches in a lot of areas than some of these mid-tier SEC teams do. And I think we saw it on full display with Brett Bielema against Shane Beamer, right? Shane Beamer had the high-rated recruits. He had the guys that were getting all kinds of love for being top players next year and everything else. Brett Bielema was missing some of his star players in that bowl game. And Brett Bielema coached circles around Shane Beamer. I would contend you put Billy Napier up against, I don't know, Matt Rule, and Matt Rule is going to outcoach Billy Napier. I would contend you put Kirk Ferentz up against Hugh Freeze, and Kirk Ferentz is going to coach circles around Hugh Freeze. So as far as I'm concerned, Yes. Does the SEC have more talent? Sure. But as far as I'm concerned, and I know I just said that twice in a row, but Big Ten just has better coaches, and I don't think that always gets the love and the credit that it deserves in a lot of these top 25 preseason top 25s.
Yeah, and the other, Indiana, the belief in Signetti, he pulled in the California quarterback Mendoza. That kid's got a ton of experience, really high rated, got some players to return that showed they were really good quality Big Ten people. So that's impressive. Michigan's not higher just because quarterback, right? Offensively, that Bryce Underwood, you're not going to start a freshman and have him do great. I mean, you saw that with Dylan Riola. He had a fine season and everything, but first year starter, whether you're a freshman or not, it's just, you're not going to do that well. You don't want to start a first year guy. So that's why Michigan's kind of lower. They're pretty intriguing. But preseason rankings, I don't worry about them too much. The good news is, like, the committee, they didn't give a rip about the AP rankings. I mean, they said Indiana is killing everybody they're playing. We're going to reward them, and everyone was, that upset a lot of people, but the committee didn't give a damn. So that's kind of like I think the committee did a hell of a job all year, frankly. I mean, in the debate was more in the AP and the other things. So, JR, I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but it would, going back to my original point though, I mean, Michigan State needs to step up. Wisconsin being down is not good. Iowa needs to figure out their quarterback situation. I mean, it's not that hard to get a decent quarterback. I don't understand.
Well, they got Mark Gronowski. I think Mark Gronowski's going to be good. As long as surgery and everything goes well, and his arm is still usable.
Yep. And then USC, of course. And, the thing with USC, they lost a ton of, they were up in the fourth quarter 4 or 5 times and they ended up losing those games. They easily could have been 9-3. That's actually a good team. They beat LSU and Texas A&M, who are like not middling SEC teams. 9-4 and 8-5 teams, I think. I'm stealing my thunder from later, but I do think USC, it was deceptive a little bit in their record. Just they were bad at winning the close games, right? And if they flipped that, they easily could have been the 9-3 team. But we need them to be the 9-3 team, right?
Yeah. Same thing for Nebraska in some cases. Yeah. We'll see if they can flip that next year. I think so. As far as I'm concerned, I would have Illinois higher. I don't see how you don't have Illinois at least around 10. I saw some where Illinois was like 24th and 23rd. I personally don't get that. I saw some that had them at like 12 or 13th. I'd personally still put them higher, but I can understand that a little bit more. But most places had Illinois top 15. It was just a few little outliers that had them like 24th, 25th, stuff like that. Actually, the one that had him the highest was Andy and Ari, which is funny. I have a little story about that. I tweeted at Andy and Ari and told them, I was like, you guys are really sleeping on Illinois here. Go check and see how many players they have back and everything else. And they liked my tweet, and so I didn't actually talk to them, but they liked it, and I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe they saw it. And then they come out like a week later and they have Illinois in there, and they said, yeah, somebody responded to us and told us we needed to take a second look at Illinois, and we did. So we ranked them 7th, and I was like, hey, there we go. So maybe it was somebody else too, but I'm sure enough people let them know you need to take a second look at Illinois, and that's what they did. And but they didn't give all that much love to Indiana. They had Indiana 23. Michigan was probably the most controversial. You had some that didn't even have Michigan ranked, and then you had others that had Michigan, like Joel Klatt had Michigan 10th overall.
People were burned last year by Michigan. Remember, when people forget this. When we went into the season last year, some people had Michigan in the top 5. Everyone had them in the top 10. And you can't blame them. They're going to have 4 or 5 first-round draft picks in the NFL draft coming up. 4 or 5 first-rounders. So they totally underachieved. And now they don't want to put them that high, right? Because they kind of got burned by doing that, I think. So Michigan really is a mystery to me, though. I don't know what to think about where replacing them. You know what I mean? Because you still have the Sharon Moore. He totally botched the first part of the season. I mean, I'm stealing from my thunder again. I'd give him a D- for the first part of the season. For his last 2 games, he gets an A. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know I guess that comes out to a C for the year or something. But they're kind of a mystery team for sure.
Yeah, for sure. PK says maybe you need to tweet about IU. Maybe I do. Maybe my tweets matter more than I think they do. So I'll take that to heart there, PK. I'll go be on the lookout.
By the way, if that's an IU fan, my whole goal for this podcast is that we go as long as possible, so I don't have to watch Indiana live basketball tonight.
If John was here, he'd be all in that. So
they're at Wisconsin.
John's
means a guarantee.
John was our very first Indiana fan that started watching, and he laments Indiana basketball every time he's on here. Even if it's a football show, he's in the comments section talking about, oh no, guys, I have to watch Indiana basketball tonight. Pitt Snipe says, so if Fickle tanks this year, does Burt go to Wisconsin 2.0? I mean, the way things ended there, I can't imagine that would happen. I mean, Burt, whatever you want to call him, he left because of correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but he left because of the salary pool for his assistants and everything else. And, didn't exactly leave on great terms, and he seems really, really happy at Illinois. I don't think he's leaving for any job, unless something major comes calling, but I think he's just really, really happy at Illinois. He's bounced around so many different places. He's been at so many different schools. I think he's just glad that he's at some place that appreciates him, where he can be around, he can have a good staff with him, and Illinois is no slouch in recruiting area too. They got some good talent in the state of Illinois that he can go after as well.
Yeah, I don't see him coming back for sure. And Illinois, Wisconsin's not. It's not too difficult to be a good, but to take it to the next level that Fickle's trying to. That's hard. I mean, it's hard to get the kids to go to Wisconsin, the skill players you need to build the depth there and everything. The other thing, if Fickle tanks, you're looking at a new AD too. The guy who former Wisconsin player under Alvarez who took over, he hired Fickle and they agreed on trying the Longo experiment. The Fickle goes, they're looking at new AD. So everything's going to be much different, right?
Yeah.
If that happens.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Do we want to address Ohio State really fast? I mean, most of these way too early top 25s were done before. Maybe some of them were done after Knowles left, but pretty much all of them were done before Chip Kelly and Justin Fry left. I mean, Jeff, do you think that I had this discussion with Zach, so I'll just ask you really fast and then we'll move on. Do you think that the coordinator changes and Justin Fry leaving Ohio State should affect their positioning at all? They're still the favorite in most odds places and stuff like that. So I can't imagine, that they've dropped that far on other people's top 25, but would you still put them maybe top 3 or maybe just top 5? What's your thoughts in that area?
I mean, maybe affect them a little bit, but to me, Ohio State, it comes down to the quarterback. I mean, are they going to get, they don't need great play, but it is going to be a first-year starter. Remember, I just said if you have a first-year starter, it's hard to have too high expectations. But when these were placed, they knew Ohio State's going to have a first-year starter, and there's just that belief in Jeremiah Smith and all the other weapons that Ohio State has. The other thing is, despite all change and everything, they have the stability of Ryan Day, right? And he's proven he knows what he's doing, and then they've got other really good coaches. I would like to see them, advance that Matt Guerrieri guy, and just for the internal hire and everything. I think Chip Kelly is a bigger loss than Jim Knowles, frankly, though. I thought the combo of Chip Kelly's run schemes, remember, UCLA was the leading rushing offense in the Pac-12 last year. They had basically most of the same personnel, and they were dead last, I believe, in the Big Ten in rushing this year. I mean, Kelly really knows how to scheme up runs. And Ryan Day's expertise is scheming up passes and the way to get his elite receivers open. And that combo was deadly. As with any coaching changes, though, it took a while for them to figure it out, hindered by the offensive line issues. And that's why, the Penn State to Knowles, it's a big
lost me.
Oh, can you hear me still?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
The
Sorry. Go ahead. I think
Knowles
it's my
going to
internet.
Penn
You go ahead.
State is a big deal, but you don't like with a new coordinator have them instantly have everything in sync. The new system is rolled out, and bam, you hit the ground running. It could take the full season for them to adjust to that defense. Now, Penn State's talented enough; they're still going to be really good on defense. It's almost like a given. But again, circling back, I just think the Chip Kelly thing is a huge deal for. Not that they can't replace him. I just think the combo of him and Ryan Day was the best offensive coaching staff in the nation easily, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And when you make the point of the returning quarterbacks, really the only top 5 team consistently out there that has a returning quarterback is Penn State. And Joel Klatt put them number 1 in his top 10.
Because he believes in our development, at least. Yeah.
Right. He believes in Drew Hour's development, and he believes that James Franklin can kind of do what Ryan Day did this past year and kind of fix his big game issue. We'll see. I'm not ruling it out completely. I would be lying if I said I wasn't worried. But you know what? I was worried last year for Ohio State going into it too. Could Ryan Day, especially after our Oregon game, it's like, oh, okay, well, we have all the talent in the world, but are we going to utilize it the right way? And for most of the rest of the season, they did. There was one game where they didn't, but all right. We are going to hit another commercial break really fast. Oh no, Jeff, David French just hit us. Breaking news: Ohio State hires.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Thanks, David, that was funny. I appreciate that. All right,
Yep.
we are going to hit a commercial really fast, and then we'll come back and we will talk about Jeff's 5 truths about the Big Ten. Stay with us, everybody. Home Field is your go-to destination for premium collegiate apparel with a passion for comfort and a flair for vintage design. Home Field brings you gear that is comfortable and stylish. With over 150 colleges to choose from, Home Field digs deep into the archives, uncovering forgotten logos, iconic mascots, and legendary moments to create one-of-a-kind apparel. Use my code TBTH for 15% off for new customers, or use my link in the description. All right, back here on the Big Ten Huddle, we are going to get to Jeff's truths. Before we do that, really quick, do want to remind you that you can become a member here at the Big Ten Huddle. We have monthly call-in shows that you can do. We also have priority in the chat to bring you up if you are a member, and then we also give you the opportunity to request topics and stuff like that before the live shows. We do put out a post. All you have to do is comment on that post and let us know. So we appreciate everybody who's here. We appreciate all of our members. I'm going to turn it over to Jeff. Jeff is going to explain his truths, and then I'll be here for commentary when he asks. So Jeff, here is your truth number 1.
So again, I'm going to hit on 5 here. My article on site has 8. You probably hit these kind of faster. We had a great discussion here. I know we're up against probably an hour here. But the good news is this first one applies to all Big Ten team fans, right? So no matter who you are, this applies to you. So any team in the Big Ten can make the college football playoffs, and it can happen within a year or two of hiring a new coach. 2024 Indiana showed the way. So let's be clear. Under a 4-team field, I would say 2/3 of Division I teams had no shot of making a 4-team field. The 12-team field opens it up to virtually everyone, but a lot of things have to sync together for this to happen. And one of the things that's amazing about the Indiana and the Kurt Signetti story is to understand how bad Indiana is. So let me go through this quick. They were 3-9 under Tom Allen the prior year. Obviously, this year they're 11-1, 8-1 in the Big Ten, and number 10 seed in the playoffs. They've been playing football since 1887. They have more losses than any Division I football team. They overtook Northwestern in 2012, and they have the 3rd worst all-time D1 winning percent. They don't have a coach who has a career winning record since 1947. They haven't won the Big Ten title since 1967. They had not won a bowl game since 1991, the year after I graduated from Indiana. And get this, they have not had a first-round NFL draft pick since 1994. It's been 30 years. And then
Wow.
the final thing is, since
Go ahead. I was just saying, wow, at the first-round draft pick. That really surprised me. Go ahead.
wide receiver Thomas Lewis, by the way, I think he got drafted by the Giants. Since 94, That's 30 years. They've only had 2 winning seasons within the conference. So credit to Tom Allen in 2019, and then 2020 was the COVID year where the magic happened. But only 2 years over 500 in the conference. So the fact that Indiana made the playoff is a minor miracle. It does give you hope. A lot of things that had to come together with that. There is another example I have, though, of how things can come together. So I'm old, but I'm going to age myself here. Northwestern in 1995, they had a coach named Gary Barnett who had a linebacker named Pat Fitzgerald. He was a team captain. The prior year in 94, they went 4-6-1. And then in 95, they went 10-1 overall, 8-0 in the Big Ten. And importantly, they didn't play Ohio State. They avoided Ohio State that year, who happened to be ranked number 6 in the nation. They ended up going to the Rose Bowl. They lost to Keyshawn Johnson and USC 41-32. But this Indiana is not. There's more than one example of how this can happen. The beauty is, for all these teams out here, the transfer portal obviously makes flipping a roster way easier than in the past. Players not needing to sit out a year means playing time is a huge selling point. You might have some of these SEC high recruited players who are sitting behind people, time's ticking, and they can go to Purdue and start right away. That's really compelling, right? And then finally, the TV contracts that the Big Ten has and everything. Really, you're going to see this more in the future here because this is future focused also. But that revenue that we're going to have for sharing is going to be higher than other conferences. Really should allow. There's no excuse. The old I need 3 or 4 years to get something done no longer holds, right? Which drives me crazy with Mike Woodson for Indiana basketball, by the way. There's just no, he's in year 4. He should never even got to year 4. There's no excuse for you not to be able to, in 2 years, change dramatically how good your team is and even potentially make the playoffs. Any team has a chance to do that in the Big Ten, I would argue. JR, what do you say to that?
I think I agree. I mean, my counter was going to be Northwestern, but I mean, under Pat Fitzgerald, Northwestern managed to win 11 games. What was it, 2 or 3 times when he was there? So
Make the Big
I don't
Ten
know.
championship game 3 times, was it? 2 or 3 times?
Something like that. But I mean, like, I think the stat that I heard somebody say one time, I've not verified this, but the Big Ten team that would have made the playoffs the second most behind Ohio State in the old format was not Michigan. It was not Penn State. It was actually Wisconsin. And so it goes to show a team like Wisconsin, who has, been down the last few years, they were at one point much better and able to win more games. And maybe they'll get to that point again under Luke Fickell or somebody else. But I tend to agree with you. I don't think that really anybody in the Big Ten is so bad that they can't get themselves to 10 or 11 wins. I mean, PJ Fleck got his guys to, 10 or 11 wins in 2019 or 2021, one of those two.
I mean, he was close.
Yeah. So Michigan State made it to the playoffs when it was the 4-team playoffs. Michigan made it 3 years in a row. Penn State made it, would have made it a number of times, and they made it this past year. Like, I can't really think. Washington was in the national championship game just 2 years ago. Like, I can't really think of anybody. UCLA, maybe. But I would argue that there's enough talent out there in California that, you'd be able to you'd be able to put together a good enough team that you could get 10, 11 wins. So
the key is you got to have good talent, things kind of come together, and also have that right schedule. So the Northwestern in 95, they avoided Ohio State, and maybe they would. I mean, that was a good Northwestern team. They might have beat that Ohio State team. It had Joey Galloway and other people, and then obviously Indiana. I'm gonna cover that. They had an easy schedule. I mean, they did, but they took advantage of it, and importantly, they had the largest winning margin of any team in Division I football for the regular season, and the committee knew that and rewarded them for it. That's how they made the playoffs.
Yeah. Philip brings up an interesting one, and then we'll move on. He says Loxley can't. Well, I don't think Loxley can, I'll be honest, but I think Maryland could if they get the right coach in there. I mean, the DMV has enough talent in it and stuff. You could build a pretty good program at Maryland if if you get the right amount of talent and stuff. I mean, heck, the DMV, I think, has the number 2 player in the nation in the 2026 class. He's committed to Maryland right now, but he committed to Maryland and then announced that he was visiting like 4 more schools. So we'll see how that works out for him. All right, truth number 2, Jeff, you ready for it?
Number 2, the Big Ten was the best conference in 2024. Move over, SEC. Now, notice I said in 2024, that doesn't necessarily mean going forward. But Frank, until the last 2 seasons, this was a non-starter discussion. I mean, consider these stats. Since 2006, when Florida beat Ohio State for the championship, the SEC had won 13 of 17 titles up to 2 years ago, including 7 in a row. Only exceptions, ACC had FSU winning 1, Florida State, Clemson 2, and then, of course, Ohio State in 2014, the Zeke Elliott team. But one of the keys, and I'm a big believer in you got to have NFL dudes. And so in the past, it is true, the SEC has just cleaned up in the draft. So I have stats from the 10 years, most recent 10 drafts in the NFL. SEC had 586 total draft picks. Second was the Big Ten with 428. That's a difference of 158 picks over 10 years, almost 16 per year. So, the SEC bias, that's where it kind of comes from. When people see all these SEC players in the NFL, that really influences them quite a bit. The good news is the Big Ten is clearly second most in generating NFL talent. After our 428 for the Big Ten, it drops off to the ACC at 352. That's about 70 some less, right? So, and then first round picks, SEC with 105 over the last 10 years, the Big Ten with 59. That's a big difference, folks. I mean, so again, let's go to, the data supports the SEC winning titles. It is more than that. They have depth, but let's look at the last couple of years. Michigan and Ohio State winning the titles the last 2 years, Big Ten putting 2 teams in the Final Four this year. It's the first 2-year stretch where the SEC didn't have a national title finalist team, like 2 years in a row. And then in bowl games, what was the Big Ten's record versus the SEC? 5-0. So it does include the 2 wins for Ohio State over Tennessee and Texas, but you have Michigan, a depleted Michigan team over Alabama, Illinois over South Carolina, which was a huge win for the Big Ten, and then USC over Texas A&M. Not to understate that. In bowls, the Big Ten was 11-6 in bowls and playoffs. The SEC was only 8-7. And then in the playoffs, the Big Ten was 6-3. 4 of them were Ohio State wins, but the SEC was under 500, 2-3, with 2 of those wins from Texas. And so my final point would be, what about that middle of the road, Jeff? If you're an SEC team, I'd say, well, yeah, our middle of the road team, USC, who won 7-6, they beat LSU, who finished 9-4 and to start the year, and they beat Texas A&M to finish the year, who was 8-5. So, I do think this is not like a slam dunk thing, but it really is the case that the SEC can't say, oh, there's no way you can say. The evidence on head-to-head says the Big Ten was better. We have to see that happen more than 1 year, JR, because it's kind of like Indiana. They had that great year this year, but I wrote an article on my site. For Indiana to really change people's perception, next year is huge for Indiana. If they go back to 6-6, everyone's going to be like, that was a complete anomaly. That's a complete luck job by Cignetti, right? It's about a sustaining success, right? And I think it's the same kind of for the Big Ten versus the SEC discussion. So that's number 2 for me. Any comments?
If Kurt Cinetti goes back to 6-6 or something like that, he's going to get the Mel Tucker label. I don't think it's going to happen, but yeah, you get that label pretty quick. They were Big Ten was 5-1 in the postseason. I think you said 5-0, but 5-1 in the postseason, which is still dominant and still shows how much better the Big Ten was in many areas than the SEC was overall. So no, I agree with you. I mean, I've been saying it, like the Big Ten was the better conference this past year for sure. I would argue in 2023 that there was a good argument for the Big Ten being the better conference that year as well. And the thing I always go back to is it's like, you want to talk about all the, not you in particular, I'm talking about the SEC people, want to talk about how like, oh, well, the middle of the pack of the SEC was better than the top of the half was. And it's like, okay, that's what Big Ten fans were saying for a long time, though, about the Big Ten and the SEC. It's like, oh, okay, well, you're a top heavy conference. Our middle is better than your middle. And, for years they said, nope, not gonna, that's not true. And it doesn't matter because we won the championships. And it's like, okay, yeah. But then when the Big Ten starts winning the championships, it's like, well, let's talk about the middle. And it's, I do think there's a discussion on both sides, but as far as I'm concerned, just gotta remain consistent in it all. But I do know one thing though. The SEC is always going to own in hypotheticals. We stand no chance in the hypothetical matchups.
Yeah, well, imagine what happens if Penn State pulls it off in its 3 years in a row. And the trump card is if you keep winning titles, that will just speak volumes. It's kind of like it's the trump card, right? You can say all this other discussion.
And if you get
who won the
and
Natty?
If you get more teams in the playoffs again, right? What happens if the Big Ten gets 5 teams in the playoffs this year and the SEC only gets 4? Imagine if Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, Indiana, Illinois make the playoffs. Like that's going to be a pretty big statement.
Absolutely.
So. All right, we're going on to number 3.
Number 3, so, this ties to everything here, but the randomness of schedules is going to strongly impact team success. So we have 18 teams, 9 conference games, really unbalanced schedules. It's going to dictate team records, who makes the Big Ten championship game, who makes playoff participants, because that's exactly what happened this year. So, Jared, let me ask you, which team had the hardest conference schedule in the Big Ten based on opponent record? So it's hardest conference schedule. Forget non-conference. Who had the hardest conference schedule based on
hardest conference? Hardest conference schedule. Was it Ohio State? They played multiple double-digit win teams. Purdue, Wisconsin,
UCLA. They played Big Ten teams with a 51-30 Big Ten record, a 63% winning percentage. All along when I was evaluating UPSC and choosing them against the spread, I knew they weren't nearly as bad as people thought they were. They finished 3-6 in the Big Ten, 5-7 overall. But I think Deshaun Foster actually did a good job of keeping that team playing really hard. And so this is the case where the randomness of schedules really hurts you. You mentioned Purdue, second toughest schedule, 49-32 opponent record in the Big Ten. That's 60%. So, of course, Purdue went 0-9 in the Big Ten and 1-11. Not only that, then they played Notre Dame as well in the non-conference, right? 14-2. So Brian Walters didn't have a great chance. The difference is, unlike UCLA was having some close games, Purdue was just getting smoked, right? So he didn't have much argument there. Let me ask, JR, which team had the easiest schedule in the conference against conference opponents in the Big Ten? Easiest schedule.
I'll just go with the what seems to be the consensus answer. Was it Indiana?
Indiana. So I wrote a truth on Indiana on my site too, and it's basically people were right. They played a terrible schedule, but again, I go back to they were blowing out everyone, right? So, and that's not easy to do, but they played teams that had a 28-53 record for a 35% win rate. Of their 9 Big Ten games, 7 of the 9 worst teams in the Big Ten they played. Washington, UCLA, Nebraska, Michigan State, Northwestern, Maryland, Purdue. They were 7 of the 9 worst. And then Indiana only played 2 Big Tens with winning records. Ohio State, who went 7-2. They lost, of course. And Michigan, who went 5-4. So their best win was against 5-4 at the time, Michigan, who of course finished 8-5 overall. And so Indiana missed playing Oregon, playing Penn State, playing Illinois, all in the top 25. So the point is, this unbalanced schedule is also going to give that opportunity for any Big Ten team to potentially make the playoffs, because you miss a couple of the big guns or someone has a down year unexpectedly, bam, you're 10-2. You're in the playoff, baby. I mean, but some people are going to get screwed and lose their jobs from having a brutal schedule, right, for a couple years in a row. And a coach could get fired when they're really not that bad. I
Luke
mentioned,
Fickell.
Luke Fickell. I didn't do what Wisconsin's schedule looked like, but it was pretty bad. The other thing,
Yeah, it was
Ohio
pretty
State, you
brutal.
mentioned, JR, they played teams with a 44-37 Big Ten record, so 54%. I mean, but the difference is they played the top teams. They happened to play like a Purdue, which pulled that record, down, or that winning percentage down, but they had to play Oregon, Penn State,
Yeah.
Indiana. Penn State didn't have to play Oregon and Indiana. So it's just wild to me. Ohio State won at Penn State, but because Penn State didn't play Oregon, Indiana, Penn State gets rewarded and goes to the Big Ten championship game. They lose. They get rewarded again by getting put in this bracket that was so easy. It was pretty crazy. Oregon is the team that clearly got screwed. And so across all these conferences, you're going to see the same thing in the SEC. All these, Florida this year got screwed. Their schedule was ridiculous. There were other teams that was way easier. I mean, Georgia a couple years ago, really easy schedule. Michigan 2 years ago, their schedule was trash. I mean, it was really bad. So, the randomness of schedules is really going to impact all these things, right? I don't love that result, but also it gives that opportunity for that team to come from nowhere, like Indiana, and make the playoffs. Any comments on that one, Jay?
Terry's asking, what was Rutgers' schedule like in terms of wins and winning percentage?
Yeah, so Rutgers, second easiest Big Ten schedule.
Okay.
The teams they faced were 32-49, so 40% winning percentage. And that's why, Rutgers won 7-5. Normally it's like, hey, that's pretty good, Greg Schiano. But when Rutgers saw their schedule and with their returning players, they were thinking 9-3, baby. And so, everything's relative. It does depend on your. Goes back to the Luke Fickell conversation. I don't think it's as simple as saying he goes 7-5, he's gone. If they play well against those teams, I think he's fine. If they're getting blown out, it's a different story.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's go to number 4 here, Jeff. Number 4.
Number 4, home run coaching hires do not exist. So, JR, tell me, what Big Ten team had the second best, and everyone think about that, what Big Ten team had the second best conference record in the 2010s? That means from 2010 to 2019, within the Big Ten conference only, forget non-conference, which Big Ten team had the second best conference record in the 2010s?
Say that one more time. I apologize.
So which Big Ten team in the 2010s had the second best conference record, meaning record within the Big Ten conference against other Big Ten teams?
It was probably either Wisconsin or Michigan State, wasn't it?
That's a great guess. So it was Wisconsin. I think people would be surprised.
Okay.
So number 1 in the 2010s.
Well, they started 2010 and stuff like that really well. That's when Brett Bielema was winning his Big Ten titles.
So Ohio State had an 88% win percentage that decade. Wisconsin was number 2 at 76%, way above anybody. Third was Michigan State at 67%. Remember, Mark D'Antonio was doing an awesome job during that decade, right? And he's also why the Big Ten needs Michigan State to be more top 25-ish, right, in their battle for supremacy with the SEC. But Wisconsin was easily the second best team. And I only bring that up because, Luke Fickell, when he was hired, he was considered a home run hire. He was hired November of 2022 to replace Paul Chryst. Came from Cincinnati, went to the college football playoffs and lost Alabama, but actually played pretty well against them, right? I get Athlon Sports. They called it an A+ hire, saying Fickell's ties to the Big Ten ensure a quick transition in Madison. He won 57-18 at Cincinnati for 760 win percentage. But he hired Phil Longo to run the air raid, and it didn't work. So his 2 years in Madison, first 2 years, 7-6 and 5-7. He's under 500. He's 12-13 after 2 years at Wisconsin. Here are the 3 prior Wisconsin head coaches in their first 2 years. Paul Chryst went 21-6 his first 2 years. Gary Anderson went 19-7, and Brett Bielema went 21-5. I mean, you're talking 3 coaches who in the first 2 years did awesome. We're talking great win percentage, like 75%, and he's under 500. So it's been a disaster, frankly. He's been horrible. I mean, I give him a D-, and yet he was the hands down home run hire in the hiring cycle that year, right? Another one, home run, Lincoln Riley, going from Oklahoma. At Oklahoma, he went 55-10 for an 846 win rate. That's like Ryan Day-like there, right? 3 times he made the 4-team college playoff, didn't win one, but still gave Georgia a hell of a game in the Rose Bowl, and never lost more than 2 games in all of his years at Oklahoma. Goes to USC, home run hire, right? First year was pretty good, but through 3 years, 26-14. So that's a 650 win percentage. And last year we know 176. Now, I do think, last year he could have been 9-3, but I don't know if I'm going to put him on the hot seat only because his contract and buyout is so high. And of course, the third one, and I'm not going to go into the numbers for it, but who can forget Scott Frost, UCF, supposed
national champion Scott Frost.
Right? Yeah. But former quarterback, led him to the national title, came home. The son came home to take his old school to glories. And we all know the results there, right? Couldn't win 1-score games. So I guess my point is, it is amazing. You think, oh man, this guy's going to be the home run hire, even thinking an assistant might be a home run hire. You just don't know. There's no such thing as a home run coaching hire in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I mean, I think Luke Fickell encountered some issues along the lines of, injured quarterbacks and stuff like that. But I still, I said it last year, he shouldn't have brought Braden Locke back. Braden Locke obviously was not a good enough backup quarterback for Tanner Mordecai, and then you brought him back again, and I think, unfortunately they suffered from that. Now, I think they learned their lesson by bringing in Danny O'Neal and Bailey Edwards this year, but, we'll see. Hopefully it goes well for him. I'd like to see Luke Fickell stay at Wisconsin. I think that he has a future there, but I'm with you. These home run hires and Fickell and Riley just have not gone the way that people thought they would. We have a super chat from Ryan Wiley. Ryan, for $5. Thank you for being here, and thank you so much for the contribution super chat. He says Wisconsin can make a bowl. Wins versus Miami of Ohio, Middle Tennessee State, Maryland, Iowa, Washington, and Minnesota. Those are all winnable games. I agree. Iowa, we'll see, kind of what they become. Mark Gronowski's going to make that offense better, I think, but they're replacing a lot on defense. They do typically reload pretty well, but the defense wasn't as good last year, and that was with a lot of returning players. So I'm interested to see what Iowa looks like. And then Washington, that is a home game for Wisconsin. And, as we saw last year, the best time to play Washington is when they are not at home. And then Minnesota, that's at Minnesota. I think that's going to be a battle there at the end of the year. It was a battle this last year. PJ Fleck, he's improving as a coach, and if they do decide to start Drake Lindsey, that's going to be well into the year, final game. And so he'll probably be used to things by then. So Wisconsin
Minnesota will be having a new quarterback, right? Mac Rosemer did graduate. Jared, who have they? I should know this, but did they get a transfer portal quarterback, or what's the status on that?
Yes, they got Zach Pyron from Georgia Tech. He's 4th or 5th year guy, and then Drake Lindsey was a freshman last year. They tend to lean toward Drake Lindsey being the guy, and Zach Pyron kind of being the depth kind of veteran guy to help him out. I think it's more of a quarterback battle than maybe some others think, but because Minnesota fans didn't seem to believe Drake Lindsey's going to be the guy so much, that's just who I'm going with for now.
I'm looking at the Wisconsin schedule. They get Illinois at home. It's near the end of the year. If Wisconsin gets that quarterback going, that's still winnable. I know they're really good, but still in Madison, I've been there many times. I've been like a dozen games because my brother and 3 nephews all went to Wisconsin. Yeah. That's a winnable game. Ryan Wiley.
Well, they almost beat Ohio State 2 years ago at home. So
when I say winnable, I don't know if they're going to be favored, but any team going to Camp Randall, that's a winnable game.
Yeah.
I mean, even Ohio State going with a first-time quarterback, I'm not going to say that's impossible either, right? They're not going to be favored, obviously. And then even at Indiana, I went to Indiana, we'll see. It's not like Indiana is a buzzsaw place to play in. They're going to be selling it out and everything, a better atmosphere. So, yeah, I mean, it would behoove Fickle still to get to that 8 win. I mean, right? That makes it safe. You hate to say, well, I went 7-5, but the games were close,
Yeah, for sure. Wisconsin, they definitely have the opportunity. It's a tough schedule. I think there's no denying that. But, with that home field advantage of Wisconsin, Camp Randall and everything, it's definitely a winnable game. And Ryan, I pronounced your last name wrong. I apologize. I'm terrible at pronouncing names, so I would do better next time. But sorry about that, Ryan. I know that's something that I need to work on and be better at. Okay. All right. You think that's enough for truth number 4? Or do you?
That's done. And I have a fifth one, so I'm going to make this one shorter, JR, just because again, it's on my site. But the fifth one really is the coach with the most pressure has definitely changed. So entering 2024, it's Ohio State's Ryan Day, right? I mean, that was the story of the season, natty or bust. And then, he can't win the biggest games. Now that pressure really shifts to Penn State and James Franklin. So, Ryan Day, just the coming into the year, he was 2-5 versus top 5 teams, 8-7 versus top 10 teams. And of course, 1-3 versus Michigan, 3 losses in a row. He was 1-3 in the playoffs. He started out by losing to Oregon, making that top 5 record 2-6. But I can tell you by the end of the year, he ended up beating Penn State, bam. That's a top 5. Indiana, top 5. The last 2 were Texas and Notre Dame. So he went from 2-5 entering the year against the top 5 to 6-6. And if you're playing the top 5, you're playing the best of the best. Those included losses to like Alabama and, that juggernaut team from 2020, right? Clemson under a Lawrence quarterback and everything. So if you're 500 at, against top 5 competition, that's pretty good. Against top 10 teams, he opened the year 8-7. He finished the year 14-8. So the whole Ryan Day can't win Big Ten or big games, that's all out the window. It's not that he doesn't have any pressure, though. You're always having pressure at Ohio State. And until he solves the Michigan thing, there's going to be an element of Ohio State fans that still probably thinks he shouldn't be there if he can't beat Michigan. But James Franklin, great news. Your future NFL quarterback is staying another year, right? He's returning. Running back duo of Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, maybe they can do what Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson did and just be this dynamic duel. And then other key offensive, defensive players coming back. You got Jim Knowles in. So they're following the exact Michigan and OSU script. But the bad news is, Mr. Franklin, you're out of excuses. If you can't win big games this year, next year, when is that ever going to happen? His record against top 5 opponents is 1-15. He's 4-20 against top 10 opponents. Against top 25, he's 15-29. These are all the records of Franklin while he's been at Penn State. And against Michigan and Ohio State, he's 4-17. So, the good and the bad for Penn State is their non-conference schedule is trash. Their Big Ten schedule is not that difficult. I actually think it's a bad thing, though. I really believe if you want to win a national championship and everything, you need to be battle tested. I think Ohio State, by playing Oregon at Oregon, they lost that game, but they learned so much from that game, right? They had to play on the road at Penn State. By the time they played Tennessee, they had lost to Michigan, but they were battle tested. Michigan tested them. Even if you lose in close games, you learn more from when you lose than when you win. So I just think, JR, tons of pressure. I know James Franklin has to be excited about all that talent coming back, but the expectations for him are going to be higher than ever. There's no excuses for him. I'm not saying he has to win the Natty, but he has to win big games. He really needs to beat Ohio State at Ohio State. He's got the third-year quarterback going against the the first year starter for Ohio State and all that other talent. There's no excuse. You roll into Ohio State, you should win that game. So that's my fifth one, guys. JR, any comments to add on that one?
Yeah, I think it's just gonna be interesting as we see this Penn State team go into the season. Ohio State had players kind of saying natty or bust before the season. Michigan players, I don't remember if anybody said that word for word, but that was still kind of the feel you got from them, especially once all the allegations and everything came out. It felt like for them, it was like, look, if we don't win this whole thing, like they're gonna have ammunition on us forever. And so that's what they went out and did, is they tried to silence that ammunition as best they possibly could and won it all and didn't lose a game for the entire year. Ohio State went out, dropped a couple, but at the end of the day, it was a redemption story in the playoffs, right? So what's the story arc going to look like for Penn State? Are they going to be confident going into the season, declaring it a natty or bust? Are they going to be, maybe a little timid with the media and maybe not want to say too much? I'm interested to see. I don't think it's natty or bust for the Penn State fans, but maybe it is. I've run into a range of Penn State fans. There's some that, give James Franklin a lot of credit for coming in when the program was kind of going through their penalties and stuff like that from the NCAA, and then there's other ones that say, look, you got us through that, we appreciate it, but you got to win some big games at some point. So it's really, really hard to nail down that fan base just because there are so many different varying opinions. But I totally agree with you. The pressure is on James Franklin this year, not just within the fan base, but nationally as well, because kind of like with Ryan Day, if he can't get it done with this team this year, when is he going to get it done?
And to be clear, when I say that, I don't necessarily mean natty or bust as far as that, but it's win legit top 5 games. Unlike this past year, they didn't. Their best win was maybe SMU or Boise State, who's not even a Power 4 team, for crying out loud. I mean, they didn't have a great win. And so that's what needs to change. They also can't have just beat Ohio State and then lose in the first round. That wouldn't work either, right? So they need to kind of make a run, like be the equivalent of like a Final Four team with some really good wins to tout. And then they know, hey, he can do that, right? And they got Jim Knowles, and we can build on that. I actually believe if Penn State has a big – I think Kotelnicki's gone after next year anyway, moving on to a head coaching role. So their window might be short, right, from that perspective, as far as their offensive and defensive coordinators and taking advantage of them to parlay that into youth success.
Yeah. Dave said Penn State's best win was Illinois last year.
Yep. It was at home, though. So it was good.
So was SMU.
They better win at home against Illinois. But I agree. I don't want to downgrade that.
Yeah. I think Illinois was. Yeah, I think Illinois. I think I'd say Illinois is a better win than SMU. Yeah,
I do too. Yeah,
Boise State, better running back. They had the star running back, but I think Illinois is still the better team than Boise State, in my opinion. So
yeah, when you play a team like, if you're a Big Ten team playing Boise State, you should dominate the line of scrimmage. I mean, so to me, Illinois, that's big boy Big Ten football. I like that one better. I agree with you, David.
Yeah. Dwayne says Drew Aller isn't clutch. A lot of people said Will Howard going into the year was just a backup quarterback for Kansas State. So, I hear you guys. I hear all the things you're saying about James Franklin and Drew Aller, and I don't think they're unjustified. I'm going to kind of reserve some of my thoughts until the season plays out, because like we saw with Ohio State, there was a lot of criticism for, some of their players and stuff, and they went out and they won it all. So, what's the best way to cure, adversaries and haters and all that stuff? Just win. So that's what Penn State does.
The hard thing with Aller is, you say, even if he is real good, is his receivers good enough to make him look good and be clutch, if you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Because he's losing Tyler Warren. I know they pulled in a couple transfer guys, and that's all great, but you just don't know. So
Luke Reynolds is going to be really good for him. He's a 5-star. I question if he'll be Tyler Warren good right off the bat. Really, this is his first year getting big time, big time play. But he's still a 5-star. He's really good, and Andy Kotelnicki knows what he's doing with tight ends and stuff like that. So Yeah, it'll be interesting. So, all right, Jeff, thanks so much for coming on and doing the 5 truths. Everybody, if you want to see all 8, you can go catch them in Jeff's article. It is linked down below. Jeff, why don't you tell people where they can find you one more time before we get out of here?
So the website is bigjeffsfootball.com. And then you can see I'm on X there, Big Jeff's FT Ball on X. So if I have new articles, I always post it on X. So that's when you know you can check out what I have. Usually post once I'm not like all newsy and everything. I like to do like some deeper dive type analysis and insights and takeaways and things like that. So thanks for having me on, JR.
Yeah, and you guys will see Jeff again. We appreciate Jeff, and Hummus Hero saying thanks, Jeff, thanks, JR, thanks for being here, Hummus Hero. We appreciate you guys, and you'll get Zach most of the time, but maybe Jeff will jump in with me and Zach sometimes. And
we should do a try. Yeah, the triple threat.
Yeah, for sure. And I will say next Sunday, I am bringing college football with Sam on. I'm excited about that. Sam has agreed to come on during the Super Bowl. So, just for a little bit, mute your Super Bowl, and you can listen to us talk about everything we're going to talk about. I am going to ask him about the Michigan transfer portal class. He's been real deep into that this year. So I'm looking forward to getting some of his thoughts there. Are they going to line up with some of my thoughts? Maybe I'm too critical. Am I not critical enough? I'm looking forward to that conversation. Philip, I got to be honest. Sorry, man. No Dylan tonight. We can't go 2.5 hours. When we have Dylan, we can. I know it's the off season, but another time. So, and there we go. Doug reminding everybody, Ohio State national champions. You'll sleep well tonight, Doug. You'll sleep well tonight. All right, everybody. Thanks for being here. We appreciate it. We'll see you Sunday. I'll have some videos and stuff like that before then, but we'll have another live show Sunday, and we'll see you then. Have a good one. See you later.